Good afternoon, distinguished members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, dear colleagues. I wish you a warm welcome to this high-level panel at the 12th Global Forum for Food and Agriculture, hosted for the first time by the European Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Development, Mr. Janusz Wojciechowski. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for being our panel's host. I have very short housekeeping announcements. They concern interpretation. Ladies and gentlemen, interpretation is available into and from English, German, Spanish, French, and Polish. And you will find the different languages as you test your headphones for interpretation. The first thing I would like to do is to introduce to you the panel members. I would like to welcome Her Excellency Mrs. Josefa Sacko, who is since 2016 the Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture at the African Union. Commissioner Sacko has a long-standing experience in agriculture and agri-food trade, starting in her home country, Angola, but going well beyond that. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm delighted to greet the Honorable Anna Shiweda, the Deputy Minister for Agriculture, Water and Forestry of Namibia. Thank you very much for having joined us. Agriculture and agri-food trade are under considerable pressure in Namibia, as it is the driest country in sub-Saharan Africa. And we look therefore forward to your contributions from the very specific angle of Namibia to this panel. His Excellency Oumer Hussien, the Minister of Agriculture of Ethiopia, has kindly accepted our invitation. Thank you very much for that and welcome. I have learned that Ethiopia's agriculture, although the foundation of your country's economy, suffers from problematic infrastructure and sometimes lacks quality information to its farmers, problems that your government is currently addressing in its policy. We are therefore interested to hear from you what your views are on the topics that we are going to discuss here today. And then I'm pleased to greet Minister Euigenio Basterra, among us the Minister of Agriculture, Livestock Breeding and Fisheries of Argentina. Minister Basterra is an agricultural engineer and has devoted his entire professional life, I think that is fair to say, to agriculture in many different functions, including research. Thank you very much for having joined us, Minister, and we look forward to your contributions as well. And last but not least, it is with great pleasure that I announce the presence of Euigenio Swinnen, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. He is a giant in agricultural economics known the world over, and that is not an exaggeration. Well, I should be more precise and say that he was at the University of Leuven because Professor Swinnen has become, only a few days ago, the Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute, short IFPRI, in Washington, D.C. This institute provides policy solutions to sustainably reduce poverty and end hunger and malnutrition in developing countries. Thank you, too, for being here among us and contributing to our discussion. Before I forget, my name is Peter Bader. I'm an official of the Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development of the European Commission, and as you can see, I am here to guide us all through the event. Before we go any further, I would like to give the floor to our host, Commissioner Wojciechowski, for his welcome and his opening words for the panel. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, and it's my pleasure to participate in this panel, and I'm happy that there's such big interest of our panel, that it's a lot of people is interested about our discussion. Thank you very much for this. It was a very good idea to organize this panel. I'm very happy also that we have such experienced panelists, and our discussion, I think, will be interesting. Today I had a very constructive bilateral meeting with Ms. Commissioner of African Union, Ms. Commissioner Sacko, We discussed a lot about our future cooperation. This is very important. Cooperation between Europe and Africa, European Union and African Union is very important. As you know, the European Green Deal is now the main priority for the European Commission. This is a big challenge to reform our common agriculture policy, all policies, but also the agriculture policy to the direction better for to improve the environment protection, climate protection, animal welfare, etc. But this idea, European Green Deal, has full sense when it will be the part of the World Green Deal. The sustainable development we need, Europe is not a separated continent, that we need support the sustainable development all continents, especially Africa, because this is our very close continent to Europe. This is the reason that we should discuss about the challenges, our common challenges, to change our experience, our knowledge, good practices. Very important. This panel gives the opportunity for this. Thank you again for your coming. And I think this is a good opportunity to discuss a lot of things, maybe about the trade, for example, in the internal trade in Africa, the trade problem between European Union and Africa, and between Africa and the rest of the world. I'm also very interested about the conclusions from our discussion. Thank you, and I wish you successful panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words, Commissioner. Thank you. Let us start now with the substance of this panel, but let me first explain how we are going to proceed. For each of the three subjects that we have, that is regional and internal trade in Africa, trade between the European Union and Africa and its role and opportunities in global trade. So for each of these three subjects, we will have an introductory remark by Professor Swinnen, some sort of pitch to open the subject and to give you a platform to start the panel discussion. We will repeat this exercise for each of the three subjects that we have, and towards the end of the panel discussion, we will take questions and comments from the public, which is very numerous today, and which I appreciate very, very much. Is this procedure acceptable to all of you?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Many thanks. So, Professor Swinnen, let us hear your thoughts on the first subject, regional and internal trade with and in Africa, in particular with a focus on sub-Saharan Africa.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. In particular also because in my previous career, I would say, I have worked a lot on European agricultural policy, and particularly its implications for global trade and trade with developing countries. As most of you know, much has changed in the European Union over the past 25 years, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here now on this panel where organized by DG Agri of the European Commission, which I think is very significant, to talk about the relationship between EU and African agri-food in the agri-food sector. As Peter already said, the moderator, there'll be three parts, so I'll be a bit like a DJ. I will come up and put on a new record every time. Now, as there are so many issues to discuss on each of the sub-themes, I have basically decided to focus on a couple of the data on the big structural changes as an introduction. So the first part will be about the intra-Africa agri-food trade integration. So here are data showing what has happened there over the past 25 years roughly. And so you see the top line on the left panel shows the very rapid increase in agricultural trade within the different regional economic communities, the free trade areas in Africa. And so the bottom lines are what happened for each of the five RECs we discussed. So you have very rapid growth, and on the right panel, these are the average annual growth rates, which you see are mostly above 10%. So this is huge. This is really a big change that is taking place there. However, if we compare that with the rest of the world, and this is done on this panel, then we see that Africa, the intra-regional trade is still significantly lower than it is in the Americas, in Asia, and definitely in Europe. Okay? So there is significant growth in intra-African regional trade, but it's still much less than in other parts of the world. The other thing, though, I should remind is that the new study suggests that there is a lot of trade which is happening which is actually not captured by the statistics, and so these numbers may be actually biased downward. What is affecting regional trade? It turns out that the tariffs, etc., import tariffs, for example, do not seem to be a very important factor, or certainly not the most important factor. On the right panel, you see that the panels on intra-regional imports are considerably lower than tariffs, average tariffs for basically general trade with the rest of the continent or the rest of the world. And so the most important factors are probably the trade infrastructure, okay, which can be improved, and the non-tariff measures. Okay? So these are factors which affect basically importing and exporting. And these are this picture from a study by colleagues from IFPRI show that if you look at the purple bars, that's the tariffs, and you see they make up for most of the countries a relatively small share of importing and exporting. So the big share are the greens and the blue parts of the bars, and these are the cost of exporting time and the cost of documenting, etc. Okay, so it's different things than the tariffs which make trade difficult. And so therefore, I think for unlocking the potential intra-regional trade expansion, it's important to invest more in transport and communication infrastructure, address some of these non-tariff measures, simplify some of the standards that are used and make it difficult to trade, and also, of course, continue to advance promising trade negotiations, trade initiatives in these fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that first introduction on intra-African trade. I would like to ask Commissioner Sacko to be the first to react to what Professor Swinnen has said. First of all, when he comes on the last slide to a number of conclusions, do you agree with what he said? And from the perspective of the African Union, what must African countries do to improve regional and intra-African trade? Commissioner, would you expand on that, please?
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to agree with the statistics that were shown by Professor. It is true that inter-African trade is not really growing very fast the way we expected because of several factors. Despite the recent progress we made in terms of food security, on the continent, according to the statistic we got from FAO, until 2016, but recently, the international community is facing a lot of challenges in terms of eradicating hunger and malnutrition due to conflicts and the issue of climate change. That is why, revamping the inter-African trade on the continent, it's very important, because it will allow us to do the interconnection between the zones, the areas of deficit with the area of surplus on the continent. So we are trying to really, trying to work with our member countries to implement our inter-African trade strategy that was developed by the African Union Commission. At the African Union Commission, we have our flagship program, which is the CADEP. CADEP PP that was launched and adopted by our head of state in 2003 in Maputo, and then it came 10 years after we saw the performance of the continent, which is very weak. So our head of state came back with reinforcing the CADEP PP, and they made 7 key commitments. So the first commitment was really to reiterate the CADEP principle. The second, investing in agriculture, which is financing agriculture 10%. And then the third is ending hunger by 2025. This ending hunger by 2025, we are in 5 years' time to come. And we are seeing that we are not on track. Out of the 55 countries Africa has. It's only the most recent biannual review report that we just adopted at our STC is only 4 countries in Africa that are on track to reach the goal of ending hunger by 2025. We also have our pillar number 4 about ending poverty on the continent. We want to eradicate poverty by 2030. We are not on track. Poverty is increasing. Unemployment is a problem. And the pillar number 5 is what we are talking about: trade. Boosting the inter-African trade by 2025. We are not on track. It's only about 2 or 3 countries, according to the 43 indicators we have in our annual review report and our scorecard. There's still a lot to be done, but we are working, because our first biannual review report created awareness in terms of performance in those indicators set by our head of state. So we have this pillar number 5, which is boosting the inter-African trade, and we are doing a lot about it. We are trying to really look at the opportunity of the new African free trade area and see how can best we intensify our inter-African trade. With this, we have a continental, we have approved our continental compact in order to have the agrozone on the continent, so that we can trade on this measure. I don't know if I can continue to start, if my time is, Okay, so we have this CAP, which is called Common Agricultural Park, because we know that to trade, we need to look at taking into account the comparative advantage of each region. So we selected the 5 regions we have, 5 economic regions we have on the continent, and we selected some commodity to ensure a good food basket and food security. So we looked at the northern part of Africa, and we are looking about what are their comparative advantages, like when you talk of production of vegetable and fruits. Let them have this agro-park based, as a hub to trade among the context of the CFTA. We looked at West Africa. Their staple food is rice. Let them produce rice and trade among these CFTA. We looked at Central Africa. It's cassava. Let cassava be the hub of Central Africa. We look at Southern Africa. It's livestock. Let this region of SADC be the hub of livestock production. And we look at East Africa. It's maize. Let maize be the hub. So this is a concept that we are still working, but we have already identified to go through agro-parks in order to enter the free continental trade area. That is one of the big milestones that our STC approved in October. STC is the specialized technical committee. It's made out of our ministers of agriculture, of environment, of fishery, forestry. So we adopted the CAP, and now we are going to see with partners, mostly the ADB, because the ADB too, they have a program on industrialization. So we are going to work together so that this trade, this CFTA becomes a reality through this type of arrangement of the implementation of our common agricultural park.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. That was very clear, and I think everybody here wishes the African Union well in attaining these objectives within a reasonable timescale. Minister Shiweda, please share your views on this subject with us. What would you want to add from the angle of the specific conditions that the agri-food sector faces in Namibia? And what does your government do in order to improve, to increase, to deepen regional and intra-African trade?
Thank you very much, facilitator. And let me also acknowledge the sharing this platform with the distinguished ministers and commissioner. As we all know, Namibia is the most driest country south of the Sahara. In fact, we are squeezed between 2 deserts, the Namib and the Kalahari deserts. Water resources also becomes a problem. In general, if we would have liked, we will not call Namibia an agricultural country at all. Because the conditions, environmental conditions, are not feasible to carry out agriculture at all. But as it may be, we have observed that desert can also be very productive. And we have analyzed and we have taken advantage of the competitive advantage of the country to see what can thrive in Namibia under the conditions that we are experiencing. Especially the past 5 to 6 years, Namibia has been experiencing drought. And in the past year, last year, we lost quite a number of livestock. And livestock production is our biggest competitive advantage. But we have adopted such conditions and such measures that we want to utilize our environmental conditions to be of advantage to our producers. And we have adopted production conditions that are conducive to the country. Namibia, we have taken beef as our competitor, our competition. And we are trading our beef with the EU. Recently, we concluded arrangement with China and Hong Kong and also the Americas. Meaning that our standards are of such high standard, and we have prescribed to the international standard, for example, of the OIE, and we have not compromised on that. And our producers, they know that we have to comply to these conditions for us to enter the international market. We have also adopted conducive production environment in terms of water resources, that we use our water sparingly and also very sustainably to produce our livestock. Namibia also has a competitive advantage in terms of horticulture production, in terms of grapes and dates. And these we produce along our perennial rivers, that we use our water very sustainably, and the advantage is that we can enter the markets, you know, because we are in the southern hemisphere, we enter the northern hemisphere markets, you know, before any other competitor enter that market, and we catch the highest price for our product. Mm-hmm. We want to share the views that intertrade is very important. And we cannot do without that. Namibia has got a very small population, and whatever we produce, we cannot consume. So we have to look at the international markets, and that is our focus, that whatever we produce, it should go into the international markets, and we take advantage of the conditions that are put to our advantage, so that we take the maximum benefit on that. What I want to say here is that we take the competitive advantage of our environment and to see what we can produce cost effectively and also sustainably. We are not looking at, we are looking at the quality. That is the most important thing. What we want to put in the market is of quality standard, and that can fetch the highest price for our producers. And that is really our catch, because we don't have the advantage of producing in maximum and also in quantities, but quality to catch the highest price for our producers.
Thank you very much. That was a contribution both to the actual subject that we have, regional and intra-African trade, but also you spilled over into our third subject, trade between Africa and the world, and we will certainly come back to what you said later on today. Thank you very much. Minister Hussien, to hear from you what your point of view would be on intra-African and regional trade interests us very much. I repeat that Ethiopia is a very important agricultural country in Africa, and indeed agriculture is one of the strongest sectors that you have in your economy. So what does your country, what does your government do to answer to the challenges that agriculture and agri-food in Ethiopia faces?
Thank you very much. As my colleagues mentioned, I think inter-African or regional trade is not the issue of asking is it necessary or not. It's already agreed that after a long discussion, African has to come together, and the one African country has to be the market for the other. The only thing is the action. Why do the actions want to the level that we need? I think this must be seen and monitored very closely. Otherwise, it may take us another unnecessary time to come together in trade between African countries. I think from my country perspective, there are some of issues which we have to still work on. The issue of infrastructure, which is vital. If you digitize, and everybody knows what's produced where, it's easy to decide for consumer as well as for traders, what they can easily find where. This is one thing which need attention. The other one is even in African trade, it will work actually for African and the other part of the world also. What comparative advantage do we have? In that regard, in the case of Ethiopia, we can look into the coffee, which is the major export of our country as a product. You see, this time, from the national production of coffee, almost like 15% will be exported to the other part of the world. The amount that we have in Africa is very less than the other part of the world. For this, we are creating a platform this year, International Cup of Excellence program, in which African will take fully a briefing session. What comparative advantage do African have in Ethiopian product, likely coffee? And also we are working on the livestock sector, in which Ethiopia is still first in Africa in livestock population, but they didn't benefit much from it yet because of the quality products that we are working and the diseases around the boundaries. Therefore, these are the area which we are identifying and looking for African market. It's not only this, we are also looking for oilseeds, the high-value crops, which is, which has a good market around even neighboring countries in Africa. So we try to prioritize which product is good for Africa and which product can go beyond African even for the other, including EU nations. Therefore, as Commissioner mentioned, the technical team should come together and try to figure out, analyze what's the missing element, why it's not to the level that we want. I think what Professor mentioned is valid. On top of that, we need to see to the context of different countries. Even what's working in South Africa does not work maybe in the eastern part of Africa. Therefore, for every country, dividing into those 5 clusters, it's good to examine what the missing element that has to be fixed even within Africa. among all, which is infrastructure to me is very basic one, even within a country. That way, I think we are trying to tackle and approach to the product, and we are designing the model also, how we can reach. But capacity building, awareness are among the activity to be done very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Minister Basterra, we have heard that intra-African and regional trade in Africa suffers from a number of problems, a number of infrastructure deficiencies, possibly also specific knowledge when it comes to farming techniques at the level of farmers themselves. It is good that the situation is improving, but still a long way needs to be walked. From your point of view, when you look at what Mercosur has done, when you look at what your own country has done in order to improve agricultural farming infrastructures, do you think that Argentina, that Mercosur could offer some good practices, good examples that African countries could copy or adapt to their needs in order to improve their general situation?
Sin duda, trabajo. I give some time.
One moment, yes.
You can use
Minister Basterra is going to answer in Spanish.
Or I prefer in Spanish.
Yes, of course. Yes.
I'll go ahead. La experiencia de infraestructura combinada entre países de Mercosur y del Cono Sur ha sido de gran utilidad. Nosotros tenemos hoy infraestructura en el norte de Argentina, sur de Bolivia, norte de Chile, Paraguay y Brasil, que nos permite agilizar el comercio de un lado al otro del continente sudamericano. Y ha sido un elemento clave para el intercambio dentro de nuestros países. El acuerdo del Mercosur, que no incluye a Chile, pero sí al resto de los países que he mencionado, lo mismo que Uruguay, ha posibilitado que estrategias comerciales de empresas que pueden trabajar de manera coordinada en uno y otro país, no solo en la producción, sino, por ejemplo, en la producción de genética que se adapta a las condiciones de nuestros ambientes. Por parte de la infraestructura de redes de vías navegables entre Paraguay, Uruguay, Brasil y Argentina, se están utilizando los ríos de manera de poder tener entrada y salida con costos mucho menores que habilitan al comercio internacional. Y esto además se suma al intercambio no tan grande como uno desearía de articulación científica entre los países que componemos el Mercosur. Hay avances importantes, pero son temas que debemos profundizar, dado que el desarrollo de conocimiento adaptado localmente es la clave para la mejoría. Nuestros sistemas productivos, particularmente en Argentina, en gran escala, son considerados de altísima eficiencia. La siembra de precisión, la siembra directa, son prácticas agrícolas que se utilizan en la mayor parte de la superficie. Más del 90% de la superficie se realiza bajo estas condiciones. Con lo cual, los criterios de sustentabilidad se van expresando y reflejando en otros países. En los últimos 15 años, tanto Bolivia como Paraguay han expandido sus capacidades productivas con modelos tanto argentinos como brasileños que han tenido una expansión muy grande. Y Uruguay, que a pesar de ser un país más pequeño, ha tenido una normativa muy buena para la gestión del ambiente hoy está aportando ese tipo de conocimiento para la región. La gestión sustentable ha hecho que el Cono Sur y el Mercosur hoy tenga capacidades de exportaciones altísimas. Argentina produce alimentos para más de 400 millones de habitantes, cuando apenas superamos los 42 o 43 millones de habitantes. Sin embargo, en este proceso también hay que considerar el concepto de equidad. Hoy en Argentina estamos trabajando para que ni una sola familia en Argentina deje de tener comida de calidad y cantidad en sus platos. Por eso, los grandes desafíos que tenemos quienes somos grandes productores o quienes tienen grandes potencialidades, como es África, para que la expansión de la producción no deje afuera a los propios habitantes del territorio. Y eso quizás sea un pensamiento a compartir con nuestros hermanos africanos, que tienen un gran horizonte, que están siendo muy codiciados por sus recursos naturales para la expansión de su producción, que siempre prime la posibilidad de un desarrollo con inclusión. Gracias.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very important point that you have contributed, and I'm quite sure that African countries, the African Union, could listen to these experiences and try to adapt them to the specific conditions that you have on the continent. Thank you very much. I would like to come back just for a second to what you have said, Minister Shiweda. You have stated repeatedly, and I think fully rightly, that quality products are important in order to make your farming and livestock sector competitive. Now, quality of agricultural products is and has been an important aspect of the common agricultural policy in Europe. We have developed a number of quality schemes. We have helped the sector through the second pillar, rural development, to improve production, to improve quality, to turn more to organic farming. And certainly infrastructures in Europe are not an issue. We have rails and roads everywhere, and agricultural goods can travel from one corner of Europe to the other without any problem. So that is not our challenge, but quality is, and quality of European products helps our sector. Commissioner Wojciechowski, do you think that in the future of cooperation between the European Union and the African Union, the European quality schemes and certain lessons learned from rural development could be discussed as a solid and useful contribution for the development of African countries?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question, and I think that the international trade, this is not only the exchange of goods, of products, but also exchange of culture, exchange of good practices. And we have an European Union. Our agriculture is, I think, more modern, more intensive than in Africa, sometimes too much intensive. And Africa has chance to avoid our mistakes in the development of agriculture. This is very important that, first of all, I'd like to confirm the information from, Madam Minister from Namibia, that I visited Namibia as a member of the European Parliament 2013, and I can confirm that your effort for good quality of meat products, that your effort to fulfill European standards, because you export your meat to the European Union. This is very important for us, for me as a Commissioner for Agriculture in the European Union. It is very important that we should be open for import from Africa. It's very important for development of Africa. But from the other hand, this is very important to respect the same standards of production. This is our farmers. They say that, okay, international trade, but with the same productivity standard. This is very important, and we will ensure this in our trade relations, this requirement. But I think that our common agriculture policy, this is a successful policy, and a lot of our experience can be useful for development in African agriculture. We are ready to exchange our experience, exchange our knowledge, but also to take your good experience, good practices for our practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must say that I appreciate what you have just said, that cooperation between the European Union and the African Union should also seek to avoid certain mistakes that European agriculture may have made and to learn the proper lessons from that. Thank you very much. That's a very good point. Now, if you all allow, let us take us to our second subject now, the trade between the European Union and the African Union, practically more with a context and with a concentration on sub-Saharan Africa. And as agreed, Professor Swinnen will make a second introductory remark on this topic to get us launched into that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, I think that, well, the discussion was already launched because several people already referred to trade with the EU. So let me just show a couple of pictures here on the evolution of that trade. This shows that for agri-food exports that the EU is still the main trading partner for Africa, but there has been major changes over the past 25 years. So the blue line shows the share of Europe in imports and exports with Africa in terms of agri-food. And as you see on the export side, there were roughly 60% of all African exports went to the EU in 1995, and now 20 years later this has declined to roughly 35%. On the import side, the trend is the same, but the change is less, so it goes from roughly 37% to around 25%. Okay, but the trend is clearly there that Africa is being integrated into global markets beyond Europe. Where does the food go to, and where does it come from? So these are the top 10 countries where, in terms of trade with Africa, you see the Netherlands, France, and Spain are the number one, or the first on the list, then the United States, then Germany, and then China. If we look at the exports there, the situation is very different. Only France is among the top 10 exporters to Africa, and it's Brazil, Russia, and Argentina who are actually leading in terms of the share of agricultural imports into Africa. So one issue which has already been addressed, but I just wanted to illustrate this here, of course I didn't know what was going to be said before, is that, is the role of food standards, okay? Quality standards and food safety standards. And I just want to point out before I explain the graph is that 2002 was a really important year for European food regulations. We've had, in the 1990s, Europe had several food safety crises. And as a result of that, there was a very important new regulation which was introduced in 2002. And it was also then when the European Food Safety Agency was created. And so it was a farm-to-fork approach in terms of basically controlling the food chain. And this has spilled over in the world, if you want to say. And so, on the left-hand side, this is just this is SPS notifications to WTO. It's just one indicator, but there are many more indicators, just showing that since then, the regulations, the public regulations on food safety and to some extent quality have increased tremendously. And on the right-hand side, these are private standards. These are, in this case, global gap certifications. These are the requirements which our supermarkets or our big food processors are imposing on the suppliers, on the farmers from their source. And this is the same both in Europe and in, for example, Africa. Okay, so both have gone up dramatically. Now, it's been highly discussed what the impact has been of these standards on food trade, and there's been quite a number of studies by now, and these studies essentially show that these food standards, that can be barriers to trade, so they can make it difficult to trade. They're kind of sometimes referred to as non-tariff barriers, but at the same time, a number of studies shows that in many cases, these are actually catalysts to trade. They make it easier to trade. And I think the example that we heard from Namibia is that once you address these standards, then it's much easier to export to the European market. So these things work, actually, they operate at the same moment, and it differs from country to country, from case to case. But to illustrate that the growth in standard has coincided with actually very significant growth in trade, on the right panel is the growth of horticultural exports from Africa to the European Union, and horticultural exports are especially sensitive to these standards because these are often fresh products where standards are even more important. And you see there's been an explosion of exports between 2000, when many of these standards were introduced, until today. Basically, exports have gone ×5. Okay, some of the key factors to create a win-win situation, I'm not going to go in detail, I'm sure that will come up, is the trade agreements between EU and Africa, also trade agreements with other countries which potentially compete with Africa on the European markets. It's the food standards, both the private and the public regulations there, and how Africa can meet them. It's also investment regimes and the institutions in Africa, because a lot of this trade is now no longer occurring in the old system, but through global value chains, okay? And that implies investments by companies who are part of these value chains, both in Africa and in Europe. And then, of course, a number of domestic reforms, I think, which differ, as the Minister from Ethiopia said very clearly, this differs from country to country, so it's hard to make general recommendations on this. Okay, I'll leave it at this.
Thank you very much indeed. I suppose that a number of you in the public may have heard with some surprise what Professor Swinnen has said. There is a misconception among many people that the European Union, and not only the European Union, is brutally flooding Africa with agri-food products without any respect for the specific conditions of the populations there. And what we have heard now is a little bit the opposite. Exports from Africa to the European Union are booming over years, and that may be a trend that will continue without falling over and going down again. Now, Commissioner Hussien, in the light of what Professor Swinnen has said, what is your spontaneous reaction to that? Stronger trade relations between the European Union and the African Union, including Ethiopia, do you see them as an opportunity only, or do you also conceive some risks, in particular when it comes to trade agreements that may yet be concluded between the EU and the African Union that may put the threshold so high in quality that it might be difficult to meet by African producers?
Thank you very much. Let me start with the challenge so that I can easily come up with the opportunity that we are getting out of the EU market. First of all, I think the figure is coinciding with what I know from my country perspective. And we are key player in the EU market, most likely in the floriculture, which is very significant. And also we have a coffee trade with the traders in EU. And that there are also other products like oil seeds and the high-value crops. In that regard, even horticulture is also among the one which is already mentioned. The only point, which is the challenge is EU quality standard and African capacity. I brought this point by reason. My suggestion there is this gap is already there. The quality demanded by EU and the standard of delivery of African in the whole value chain, from the production up to the marketing, is not quite the one which fulfill what EU market demand in most of the products. So in this regard, Africans don't want to pull down the EU standard. What we want is EU has to work on capacitating African to reach its minimum standard. That's what we are urging as African. I think this will work for Ethiopian and also for other African countries. Therefore, I'm urging how we can work on maintaining the minimum quality, be it for EU or even for African intertrade as well. Once the quality is there, it works for all. So in that regard, what we are expecting from companies who are working with us in different sectors, and what we are expecting from EU Commissioner also is that working on African capacity to meet that minimum standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Sacko, from your angle and from the angle of the African Union, what are your hopes and expectations concerning the future of food trade between the two organizations, Africa on the one hand and Europe on the other hand?
To us, the problem is really this quality that Minister just raised, to reach the standard of the EU. To penetrate the EU market, you really need to have a quality product. Quality means investment. So the Minister is pledging that the EU should support us, in upgrading our quality on the, to upgrade our quality. If I look at my previous life, which is coffee, you want to export your coffee to Europe, and they're telling you you have to meet a certain quality. But quality, you have to give me a good price. The prices that are, quoted in the international market, both the London and the US, does not allow our farmers, due to poverty, to really upgrade and get good quality. They will just harvest the coffee beans, but they don't go through the process, of going to have the big, big quality, the good quality that are required in the EU market. And we can talk about cotton flour, we can talk about tropical fruits, So quality means, you have to fetch good price. Because farmers will tell you, why do I have to upgrade my quality when the prices are so low? So that is another issue, Okay, we want the good standard, but we also want good price, because farmers cannot, invest, or governments cannot invest when they know that the prices are very low. This is just an example of coffee, for instance. The way the coffee is coated at the international market, there is no need to do that quality. You can do domestic, like Ethiopia is the first African coffee producer, and their internal domestic market is much better than to go and export their coffee beans. So those are the type of areas that we need to really build capacity and capacitate, our farmers to reach the EU standard, because like my sister from Namibia is saying, they want to be quality, they want to be, like fetch premium, and they want to be like, how do you call it? A niche market on that specialized meat. But they need to invest to reach that niche market. Like if you want to penetrate the Japanese market, they are very, 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 very exigent in terms of what enters and what their people consume. So and we need to invest, and that's the way we need to really negotiate with our partners, what type of facility we can have to upgrade the type of products we are exporting in the EU market.
All right. And from your angle, Minister Shiweda, what is your feeling about the evolution of trade relations in the agri-food sector between Africa and Europe, and maybe the specific angle of Namibia?
Yeah. In our case, we don't want to adopt a strategy where we are just producing for EU or just for America or for China. We want also within the country that the meat we export to EU should be able to be consumed in the country. So we produce for the market, for the local market, for the regional, as well as for the international market. And that makes our job easier, that the measures that we are putting and the investment that we are adopting is to come up with that quality product that can be consumed locally, regionally, and also internationally. So we are saying that the meat we consume in Namibia should not be of low quality. It should also be of high standard. And the sector has been prioritized in such a way that resources are allocated accordingly. We invest heavily in agriculture. Our policy is that the Malabo Declaration should be adopted, that 10% of the budget should go towards agriculture. Our extension services should be capacitated. Investment into infrastructure should go into that. That when we produce a quality product, it should be able to go into any market. And what is also very important, our negotiations with our trading partners, we take it very seriously. And it takes time. We have really taken time, especially with trading with China, very, very, very difficult. But at the end of the day, we are there. And we have a quality product that we can export. Therefore, investment is very, very important, as the Commissioner has said. And we produce for the market, irrespective what market. And that is very important. We have I don't want to say it an issue, but I think our trading with the EU could be improved, because the standards are quite very high, and the conditions of our beef export to EU is of debone cuts, which minimizes our export to the EU. Although our meat is coming from those regions that are OIE certified, and we don't see any problem why we cannot export boned in meat to EU, but these are the issues that we are also negotiating in improving our trading quantity with the EU. And here we also ask for EU to come in, as a partner, that we work closely together in improving these conditions, and also in terms of agro-processing, to see how best we can also add value to our product, that we don't just export the meat itself, but a value-added product that can come into the market of EU.
Thank you very much. From the angle of the European Union and from the angle of the European Commission, I would like to remind everybody here that over the last years, the European Union and the European Commission has given the improvement of trade relationships, in particular agro-trade relationships with Africa, an enormous importance. There was the Rural Africa Task Force that has delivered a very, very useful report not very long ago. The Juncker Commission has developed a number of initiatives to improve the relations between the European Union and the African Union. And just as a symbol, you may have read and heard that the first external trip that the new Commission's President, Mrs. von der Leyen, made went to Addis Ababa, to the African Union. So when we concentrate on these not only gestures, but I think true expressions of political ambition to improve the relations between Africa and Europe, Commissioner Wojciechowski, for the next years to come, what is your vision, what is your dream of where these relations between the African and the European Union should go?
Thank you very much. And first of all, maybe a short reflection after statement of our panelists. Minister Hussien said that the main products for Ethiopia, for agri-products for export is coffee. Maybe it would be difficult to answer for you what is one of the main export products in my home country, Poland, in European Union. Also coffee. Also coffee, because there is it can be success story both sides, because the European Union import a lot of unprocessed food products, which is processed in European Union, and which is this is the success of the European Union food industry, maybe not agriculture, but now the European Union has a positive trade balance with the third countries. We export more, 20 billion euro more than we imported food products. This is the positive balance for the European Union. But the unprocessed food, the products directly from the agriculture, they produced directly by the farmers, not processed by the industry, we have negative balance in European Union. This is 34 billion euro per year, and this is the reason that we should protect our farmers, and we say that the same standards for this is very important postulate for European Union farmers, that we should require the same standards for importers and for our farmers. But this is the second question. I think it is very important. Minister Shiweda said that also the same standards for our consumers. That it is not a good situation that we require high standards only for the exported food and not the same standard for our consumers. This is also the problem in general, I think, not in Africa, in European Union. And returning to your question, is I think that we cooperate in very constructive way to help the African countries, African farmers, how to fulfill the standards which are required in the European Union, and not only for the import, also for improvement of your market, and to create better policy for your consumers, and for better environment protection. The high standards of production, they are not only not to block the import. They are for our benefits to the environment, to the climate, and this is our common interest to promote this standard. And my action, and I think the whole Commission, will be there to promote high standards, good standards for environment, for climate. This is very important in our international relations with Africa, not only with Africa, but with all countries. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, let us go to the last topic, the third and last topic of our panel, food trade between Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in particular, and the rest of the world over and beyond the European Union. Professor Swinnen already knows what he has to do.
I feel like a DJ. Any particular request? Okay, the last, I'm actually happy that as the second presentation, also here I'm going to show a number of evolutions which have already been addressed by the panel, which means at least that my presentation is relevant, I think. To give you a feeling about the general role of Africa in trade, we see that there's been significant economic growth in Africa, as we all know, and this has been reflected in the growing importance of Africa in global agriculture and in global trade. And so you see that Africa's share in world agricultural GDP and output has gone from roughly 10% to roughly 12%, which is a significant increase over the last 12 years. If you look at trade, there the increase has gone from roughly 4.5% to 5.5% or so, roughly. Okay, so also in percentage terms, a 60% increase, which is significant. Now, if we look at imports and exports for Africa as a whole, there we see, so the blue line is intra-Africa trade, and the orange line is exports, agri-food exports from Africa, and the green line is imports, agri-food imports into Africa as a whole. And so what we see is that since 2005, so roughly 15 years ago, that the trade balance has basically depending on how you worsened, if you want to call it, in the sense that the growth in imports has been much more significant than the growth in exports in Africa. And so on the right-hand side, you see the green column. So the green is the world, is the trade with the world. And there you see it was close to zero in 2005, which you can also see on the graph on the left. It went up very significantly until 2013, and it has gone down a bit in 2007. Now, if you look at the graph, you see there's been, in the period 2005-2011, there's been very significant growth of both exports and imports, and since then it has stabilized a bit. What's interesting is that the imports have been very volatile, and so the main reason is probably food prices. So if we go to the next slide, yeah, here. So I have compared the evolution of the global food prices, food price index, with the evolution of African food imports, and you see these, they're very strongly correlated. So when food prices went up 2005 to 2008, the import bill went up significantly, it went down 2009, and then back up again. So the prices on the global market have played a very important role in the value of imports in Africa, much more than in the value of exports. So what's the most important export commodities? This, of course, as has been mentioned by the panel already, is going to differ very strongly from country to country, so I'm just going to go pretty fast about this in terms of agri-food products. Cacao is the largest value of export, then fruits, tobacco, cotton, and coffee. And in terms of imports, it's mostly rice, wheat, and vegetables and sugar that have been imported. Now, this is an interesting graph which relates also to what the Commissioner has just said, in the sense that, so this is, so the yellow bars, the orange bars, that's the growth of processed foods, and the green bars is the raw materials, in agricultural raw materials that are exported. And so what you see clearly is that on the export side, both have gone up very significantly, but that the ratio is roughly half. Okay, so that basically raw materials are still almost twice as much exported than processed products. On the import side, you see that the processed imports are more than raw materials, but not that much more, about 20% more. And in both cases, you see there has been significant growth, particularly in the period 2000 till 2012. I have illustrated that. I actually edited a book on the economics of chocolate a couple of years ago, and these are pictures from that which nicely illustrate. And so these are data on the left panel for 50 years, and you see very significant growth of cacao exports from particularly Africa, which is the blue line. But what's interesting is that we now also see significant imports of chocolate into Africa, which is much less well known. And so it illustrates something about these global value chains, that a lot of this cacao is exported as raw materials to Europe or North America, processed there into chocolate, and then re-imported. Okay? But this is, I think it also signals the growth in Africa, because this imports very recently only started after 2000. And I've put these numbers up there that the first stage processing, the grinding is significantly increasing. So part of the value chain in terms of processing is shifting into Africa right now, or staying into Africa. So I've just put some very general points here up. I'm sure there will be much more insights from the panel now. I think that because of the continued economic growth, demographic changes, we see this increase in African markets demand, so that enlarges the role of Africa in global agriculture food markets, and also the role in trade. There's still much to improve, I think, in terms of trade integration for very of the countries, in terms of diversity, the border costs I talked about already, and other supply factors. Okay, and the last point, which comes out of some recent IFRI report, is that a speculation on whether, if the global trade conflicts, whether this may create opportunities for African exports, where was traditionally sourced from other parts of the world.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the word to Minister Basterra first. Let me ask you, Minister, what is your government's, what is your, maybe your personal vision about the future of agri-food trade between Argentina, which is your primary interest, but maybe also Mercosur, with Africa? Do you have a specific strategy in relation to that continent?
Bueno, muchas gracias por la pregunta. Probablemente lo que más exporta Argentina sea lo que en un futuro pueda exportar África. Para nosotros, la cooperación con África está orientada y estuvo orientada al desarrollo de tecnologías de producción e incluso participación de productores argentinos en asociación con productores africanos para hacer bien las cosas que nosotros hacemos bien, que es producir con calidad y con eficiencia. Si entendemos que la cooperación internacional no debiera ser filantrópica, sino de desarrollo. Y cuando hablamos de desarrollo, sería muy lindo ver que las exportaciones de África sean de chocolates y no de cacao, lo cual significaría que se genera mano de obra con lo que se produce de materia prima en el África. Y en esa línea creo que debiera ir la cooperación internacional. No filantrópicamente, no aceptando un chocolate de baja calidad, pero sí asociándonos para que esa materia prima pueda alcanzar los estándares que exigen los mercados que mejor pagan. Porque de esa forma se podría revertir esta situación de exportación sin que se cubran los estándares de necesidades alimentarias de las naciones. Nosotros hemos tenido un par de experiencias en este sentido como Argentina, haciendo misiones en las que hemos compartido tecnología con África. Particularmente recuerdo la experiencia personal en compartir tecnologías para la producción de algodón que puedan hacer un trabajo menos sacrificado y más eficiente para Burkina Faso, para Costa Marfil, para países que no significa quitar la mano de obra, sino mejorar la calidad de mano de obra, que no haya trabajo infantil y que se puedan producir prendas de calidad en el propio continente africano como ejemplo. Nosotros entendemos que esa es la cooperación internacional deseable en este momento para que tengamos un mundo equilibrado y que África no signifique solo un pedazo de tierra que genere materia prima para los millones que van a llegar a ser de aquí a 2050, sino que también ese proceso sea con desarrollo propio. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Yes, I understand the applause because I've observed Commissioner Sacko, who at one point nodded vigorously in support of what you said, that in particular Africa should not be exporting cocoa, but rather chocolate. You blow into that same trumpet? That is your point of view as well?
Yes.
Do you want to say something short to that?
Yes, of course, because what we are trying to do in African Union is to create job, industrialization. So when I presented my common agricultural agro-park, is in this sense, you know, if we want to export, let us export finished products. And I pledge upon my colleague from the EU to not put tariff barriers on finished products. Because when you look at you know, the value chain of a commodity, I'm very familiar with coffee because I worked in coffee, you know, for 20 years in my life. So the value starts from the end product, not from the beginning. You know, so when we are talking about fair trade, you know, that's where we want to really, you know, remove all these barriers. Children, like, you know, children are doing cacao, cocoa, you know, this is, you know, those barriers. No, in Africa, our agriculture is, you know, it is a small-scale family agriculture. If a child is picking a grain of, harvesting, helping the parents to harvest, it's not slavery. It's not slavery. It is because of poverty that we cannot buy, have labor, so the whole family is involved in that ecosystem of harvesting. We cannot give a child, a hoe to go and plow. No, but you can help the parents to pick the coffee sherry on the farm. So those type of social barriers that the EU, puts, please, I want really for us to have a fair, a fair trade, between the two colleges, between the other parts outside of Africa, of the globe, so that we can really have an inclusive, an equitable type of business. Fair trade, it's really the way forward, and I commend the Mexico farmers that really fought for the fair trade on coffee plantation. Thank you.
Very good. And I would suppose that you agree with what Commissioner Sacko has said. Because if you do, you're a bit doubtful. But we'll put them...
We don't have option to debate. We have to agree what the EU said, being African member country.
Okay. That I understand, but we don't want to deepen that. Now, when we started this panel discussion, I made a promise. And the promise was to give our public the possibility to ask questions and or make comments, because it is quite a unique occasion to have specialists like you, experienced people like you in this area around the table in one and the same room. So, I'm getting up, and because that'll give me a bit more overview over the crowd. Who wants to go first, with a question or with a comment? I think there are microphones available. So, is there anyone with a walk-around microphone? Just a second. Thank you, Billy. You were the first, so you get the chance to speak first. If I could ask you to very briefly present yourself.
Very quickly, I'm Christopher Bazivamo, Deputy Secretary General, East African Community. For those who don't know, East African Community are 6 partner states moving together in a regional economic integration process. For countries being Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and the Republic of South Sudan. These are 6. So my intervention here is to say, actually, there is no competition which should be between agriculture production, industry, and trade. We shall see them in a complementarity way, because we need industry and trade to promote agriculture. When you speak about market, it's important to understand that trade, industry are the market for agriculture, and then this promote agriculture production. Then it is important only to regulate this, to do trade fair, and to ensure this kind of complementarity, build the kind of synergy, and then later on benefit our farmers. In the African continental free trade area, as East African community, we have decided, our ministers of trade have already decided to move out as one, as a region, not each partner state individually. And this has many implications and positive implications for actually this continental free trade area to be implemented. This is according also to Article 12, where African Union have to build also on the regional economic community achievement. I conclude by saying that by the time being, we are speaking about 12% intra-trade, and expectation is to have like 52 point something percent benefiting from the African continental free trade area. So the idea here is to understand that actually moving that way is not a choice. It is not a favor for some. It is actually a must where you have to go, and we need support from wherever to ensure this is done and it is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have followed your contribution, and I do not think it was actually a question, and I do not think that it requires a comment, that it requires some answer or comment back from the panelists. There was a gentleman here who was very, very quick a moment ago with his hand. There you go.
Thank you very much. My name is Marcus Keistra, and I work for the development consultancy Join Coop. Sorry, of course. And my question is basically to the African colleagues on the panel. So what I got from the discussion very much is that you're arguing very much in line with your comparative advantage, focusing on that and basically boosting your economy through that. And as you probably also know, some economists argue that sometimes also countries have to go against this and really focus on like boosting their own industry to kind of upgrade their industry and the value add in the market. And my question is, so to all the African ministers and commissioner, what do you make of this idea? Is this also part of your strategy?
All right. Thanks very much. Now, this was a clear question. Who of you would like...
Can he come again? We didn't get him very well. I think it's about the question.
Explain your question again, but really briefly.
In industry before opening.
So, to what extent is import substitution, protecting your own, some of your own agriculture, like sector, food industry sector, for instance, agricultural processing, part of your strategy to promote your agricultural, agri-food sector?
I can answer. This is a national problem. It's not you can help us.
Do you have a spontaneous reaction to that?
Yep.
Minister, please.
Actually, when we talk about export and trade, international trade together with the inter-African trade, we does not mean that at the cost of the import substitution. Import substitution would take the first line in the issue which the country do not have a comparative advantage. While you don't have comparative advantage, if you go for import, that doesn't work, while you can produce in the country. This is actually the priority, though we are not mentioning it. So after we do the part, we move to the next step, which is international trade for the surplus product. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Madam, you're next.
Thank you so much. My name is Jennifer from Tanzania. My question is based on the contributions that we've had. We know of the EU standards. We have seen the numbers on the intra-Africa trade. Most of the trade is being done informally. To be done formally, we have to, increase the value of the products. And for that to be done, we need the know-how. So is there an action plan between the AU and EU, moving from here? What are the key takeaways, especially on the transfer of know-how? Because that's really needed in Africa.
Thank you very much. I think that is a question that went straight into your direction, Commissioner Sacko.
Thank you. Yes, within the EU-AU cooperation, last year we just signed Rural Africa. So under the Rural Africa, we identify four main pillars, on the way forward for our future cooperation and collaboration with the EU. Just before, we started our panel, I had, a courtesy call and congratulate the new commissioner for agriculture, and we talked about it to really implement what is in that concept of rural Africa. And the question you raise is part of it when you are talking about agribusiness, how to develop agribusiness and entrepreneurship. All these are there, to really build capacity of our youth, because we concentrated more on the youth, because this is the active part of our society, so that we can, build capacity on them and create the PME sector in Africa in order to really, take this advantage. So we are on it, and our rural Africa has really, an aspect of, assisting Africa for that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a lady over there who's going to ask her question in German, so everybody who does not understand German, please put on your earpiece in order to get the interpretation. There you go, madam.
Danke, dann kriege ich es besser hin. Carla Schulte-Fischelig aus Deutschland, verstehe mich als Vernetzerin und Multiplikatorin bezüglich Nachhaltigkeit. Mich würde interessieren, was Sie vom Konzept der Erzeugung eines wahren Preises halten, sprich, dass eingepreist wird Umweltkosten, dass Leute fair bezahlt werden, also dass der Kunde wirklich das zahlt, was alles an dem Produkt dranhängt.
Fair and true prices. Is that something that concerns you from the angle of Namibia? Maybe. From the angle of Ethiopia, I'm sorry.
Thank you. We are all the same, African. You can say African.
Yes.
Environment is, I think, among something which we have to consider before you go to produce. You know? You can produce and get some return for a while, but unless you think about the sustainability issue, it doesn't work. If it works, it doesn't last long. In that regard, I just argue on the even the panel which is before this. I suggest the country has to act individually, and we have to cooperate whenever we talk about environment. Not on stage level, but practically at the grassroots level. That's what I'm suggesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you allow one more and not more than one, because all the panelists have a very ambitious program ahead of them still today. This section of the room has already asked, over there as well, so I would like to give this gentleman the privilege of a last question or comment, no matter what. Please be short.
Merci beaucoup. Je viens de la République démocratique du Congo. Je parle au nom du chef de la délégation, qui est le chef de cabinet du ministre de l'Agriculture, le professeur Assanzi, qui a longtemps travaillé sur le développement de la filière sémencière. Si je me suis levé pour parler, c'est pour évoquer d'abord le premier problème concernant les changements climatiques. Les conséquences sont énorme et la République démocratique du Congo, à elle seule, présente plus de la moitié de la forêt en Afrique et qui peut aider à l'atténuation de ces changements climatiques. La question, la première, puisqu'il y en a deux, la première, c'est par rapport à Madame commissaire de l'Union africaine. Qu'est-ce que vous préconisez pour aider l'agriculture en République démocratique du Congo, étant entendu que c'est un pays locomotive pour toute l'Afrique centrale, avec 9 voisins, 100 millions d'habitants, et les commerces intra-africains pour ces 9 pays voisins impliquent plus de 100 millions d'autres habitants. Ça, c'est la première question. La deuxième question, c'est au professeur Swinnen d'EFPRI. Ça fait longtemps que nous avons demandé de pouvoir révisiter notre plan national d'investissement agricole et Madame avait reçu une lettre et c'est IFRI qui nous avait répondu qu'il était prêt à pouvoir nous aider à revisiter notre plan national d'investissement agricole. Ce plan pourra nous aider à répondre à beaucoup de questions que nous venons de nous poser ici, puisque quand on parle de la Namibie, on parle de l'Angola, on parle de la Tanzanie, du Kenya et autres, tout est lié parce que si nous revisitons notre plan national d'investissement agricole, on pourra trouver des solutions, que ce soit à gauche ou à droite, dans les échanges et dans la lutte contre les conséquences que nous connaissons des changements climatiques. Je m'arrête par là pour le moment.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Commissioner Sacko, the first question went straight to you and the second to Professor Swinnen. So,
Merci beaucoup, monsieur le délégué de la République démocratique du Congo, mon cher voisin. Je voulais vous répondre que vous avez tout à fait raison. La question du changement climatique est un défi pour vraiment accroître l'agriculture ou transformer l'agriculture dans notre continent. Je suis d'accord avec vous quand vous dites que le bassin du Congo, c'est le plus grand levier qui contribue à la stabilité et au service global. Et sur ce, je voulais vous informer que lors de la COP 24 à Marrakech, 22 je crois, à Marrakech, l'Union africaine avait mis en place 3 commissions. La commission du bassin du Congo, la commission du Sahel, commission climat du bassin du Congo, commission climat du Sahel et la commission de pays, comment dirais-je, le pays, les îles dans le continent. Sur la commission de bassin du Congo, nous avons déjà même institutionnalisé ce bassin. C'est sur la coordination de notre voisin, le Congo-Brazzaville, qui traîne un peu le pas pour la mise en œuvre de ce bassin, de cette commission, pour qu'on puisse développer l'agriculture, la pêche et tous les potentiels qui existent dans le poumon, les poumons du bassin du Congo. Donc nous sommes en train de vraiment voir si on peut accélérer. Et maintenant que la RDC vient d'avoir vraiment une démocratie très, très reconnue par tout le monde, et on est là pour vraiment mener en bon train le développement de ce grand pays. Nous connaissons le potentiel agricole que le Congo a, tant au niveau de culture de rente, ainsi qu'au niveau vivrier, et nous allons travailler avec vous. Sur le PDDA, le CADEP, nous allons voir avec IPGRU, bien sûr, parce que nous avons un programme de couvrir 20 pays pour l'alignement de leur plan national d'investissement avec le concept de CADEP. Je vous en remercie.
Thank you, Commissioner. Professor Swinnen, last words?
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I plead only partially guilty because I just started my job a week ago. So it's probably on the pile of things still to read in either my mailbox or on my desk, but I will promise I will take special attention to that. Mr. Chairman, can I just make one little remark on what we discussed very briefly?
Of course you can, yes.
It's related to the point which was made here by Commissioner Sacko, and it relates very strongly to Minister Hossein as well, because it's about coffee in Ethiopia. If we did a study about 2 years ago about why the uptake of some of the voluntary quality standards was relatively low in the region, and the reason we found was exactly what you said, was that at the farm level, for the farm level himself, the cost of investing, the cost of certification was actually higher than the extra premium that he would get, and so that's why the uptake was very low. And so,
okay. Good. Right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that our time is already up. I can only speak for myself, but I can assure you that I have learned plenty of things, and I am going away from this panel with a lot of food for thought, and I hope the same is true for you all. I would like to thank all the panelists heartfelt for your effort, your contributions, and your commitment to this panel. I would like to thank everybody in the audience. You've been a great crowd, very patient and very attentive. And I would also like to say thank you to the interpreters who, by the way, deserve a small round of applause. But the closing words for this panel quite obviously do not belong to me. They belong to the host of this panel, to Commissioner Wojciechowski. Please, Commissioner, conclude this panel.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting discussion, very inspiring also for me. Thank you, first of all, for our colleagues from Mr. Minister from Ethiopia, Madam Commissioner, African Union, Madam Minister from Namibia, Mr. Minister from Argentina, our experts, and This is the, I say, the inspiring discussion, and we discuss about the problem of international trade and international relations between European Union, Africa, between global relations, that now we have the problem how to sell our food, how to improve possibility to sell our food. But we should remember that according analysis the FAO 2050, we should increase our food production minimum 70% and to feed 9 million people. And the question will be, I think, the question will be how to produce food, not how to sell, how to produce. And the winner will be who will be not forced to import food. It will be the first winner in this situation. What is the conclusion? That it is our common challenge for Europe, for Africa, for all continents, for South Americans, for all, to protect our farming, to protect our farmers, to provide, to realize the sustainable policy, to support sustainable agriculture, and to protect the possibility to feed the 9 billion people in the near future. This is our common task. This is the reason that it's very important the environmental protection, biodiversity protection, soil protection, etc. This is also the reason we should to exchange our our experience, our knowledge, our practices, and I think that our discussion today is helpful for better understanding this big challenge, which is common challenge for all of us. Thank you again for a very interesting, inspiring discussion.